Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my friend Ole Dammegard returns to the show. Ole is a prize-winning author, investigator, and former journalist. He has dedicated more than 30 years of his life to solve the mystery behind the assassination of Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme, a dangerous undertaking which cost the lives of two of his colleagues. His extensive research has also revealed incredible links to other big political events like the killing of John F. Kennedy, John Lennon, Robert Kennedy, and many others, as well as the cold-blooded sinking of the MS Estonia, which resulted in the loss of almost 1,000 innocent lives. Ole's work is completely self-funded, so if you could take a moment after the show and visit his website, lightonconspiracies.com, and consider donating or sponsoring his work, it would be greatly appreciated. For tonight's discussion, Ole talks to us about the 1960s music scene and how many of the influential bands during that era were created and manipulated by the CIA and other shadow organizations like the Tavistock Institute and their involvement with the Beatles. We then discuss the strange world of assassins and serial killers and finish up with Ole's perspective on what humanity needs to do in order to unshackle from the Matrix. And so without further ado, here's Ole Dammegard.
Today, I would like to take you back in history, quite a few years, but I think into a time and age that was that has been extremely important for the whatever has come afterwards. And what I'm talking about is the 1960s, because that is where so much happened. It was that was the time when JFK was killed. I would say that is the time where the cabal took over, the same power structure that is still in power to this very day, and who's really messing us up big time. So for me, it's been very, very important to look into how on earth did they manage to get to the position where they are today, and what are the things and the methods and so on involved in doing that. And by studying these methods, I see that as a way of being able to also defuse what they're up to and try to get one step ahead and so on. So I think really the 60s was extremely important when it comes to this thing as well, the whole global conspiracy that is going on. Well, what I've looked into a lot and what I found is that when JFK was taken out, which was in November 1963, that was such a turning point for a lot of different things. And I've come to the conclusion that I hope is correct, that when this cabal took over, they had a lot of different plans on standby that they hadn't been able to succeed with until they took care of JFK. Once in the top power position, they could just carry out their agenda. And they really went in all different directions. They went into Vietnam, they went into the drug scene, they went into all different areas, I would say, trying to infiltrate as much as possible. Also to distract the public eye away from what was going on. So they went into all these different areas where they could really affect people and their subconscious. And one of the most powerful areas was, of course, the film industry, which is where they really hit us to this very day, but also the music scene. So when you look at what happened during the 60s, it's an extremely intense time, very, very there's so many things going on, because I think maybe if you're not aware of it, but from 1964, when the Beatles really had their big breakthrough, until 1969, which is only 5 years, that is the whole flower power culture, the whole LSD, all the drugs, the hippie movement, all of these things came from an era where the haircut of Beatles, just because they had a fringe, freaked people out. And then in just 5 years, the whole world was turned upside down, and people were running around testing all types of drugs into heavy metal and into things. So the big question is, did this happen in a natural way, or was there any kind of type of agenda behind it? And if so, what was the agenda? And the more I look into it, the more I would humbly suggest that there was a dark and hidden agenda behind this whole pop and rock scene in the 60s. So for everyone who doubts me now, which I can totally understand, I would like to take you back in time and to a small little place called Laurel Canyon. It's a small little, quite a beautiful rocky area. It's between Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley in California. And there are some theories saying that the Beatles was actually created by the Tavistock Institute one of the reasons were to distract the public eye away from the JFK assassination that they had just carried out. And if you look at it, there's only a little more than a month between the assassination of JFK until the Beatles' breakthrough with She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, and these type of songs. So I'm not sure if that's true. I'm just pointing it out. But within a year, the whole thing with the Vietnam War had started. Johnson signed the deal with the military-industrial complex and these other power structures to get the war going, because that was one part of their agenda. And at the same time, if we go forward a little bit in time, until the early 1965, some very strange things are happening, and quite a few of what will become very, very famous musicians are being drawn to a very tiny little spot on Mother Earth for no apparent reason. As far as I know, I cannot see that there was a thing that they had in common that pulled them there. It was just when you read the books that they've written, it's just like, yeah, let's go to Los Angeles and hang out, or, let's go to California and surf, or things like that. But at the more or less the exact same time, there's this whole bunch of people being pulled towards this tiny little canyon called Laurel Canyon. If I take you a little bit further back in time, during the Second World War, in 1941, there was a place called the Lookout Mountain Laboratory that was originally a fortified air defense center. This was built, it was a super secret naval base built in the center of this Laurel Canyon. And Laurel Canyon is, it's a bit of a mountainous area, lots of forest, but very tiny, just a few roads going there. And it used to be the place for some film stars from the old black and white era and so on. They were living up there. Houdini was living up there. It was a place for wealthy people from outside Hollywood and so on. But in the middle of this area, this incredible fortified air defense center was built, top secret, and it's secluded. It was in 2.5 acre off what is now called the Wonderland Park Avenue. It was hidden from view and surrounded by electrified fence. It was a top secret military intelligence facility. And in 1947, it was the world's only completely self-contained movie studio with 100,000 square feet floor space. It had sound stated, it had screening rooms, film processing labs, editing facilities, an animation department, and 17 climate-controlled film vaults, plus a helicopter pad and a bomb shelter. I mean, this was the thing. According to some experts, it is said to have produced some 19,000 classified motion pictures. 19,000!
Wow.
That's more than all the Hollywood studios combined, which should have made this canyon the motion picture capital of the world, but run by the US Air Force. And I tell you, I don't know how many of you that have heard of this place. I had not heard a word about it until a few years ago. And
what kind of films were they turning out, Ole? You said they were classified.
This is the thing. What type of films were they? Because 19,000, how many of these films have we seen? How
Right.
many have been used to manipulate us? How many have been... I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. But I know that people like John Ford, Jimmy Stewart, Ronald Reagan, Bing Crosby, Walt Disney, Marilyn Monroe, and so on, they were given clearance to work on these undisclosed projects.
Okay.
And no one ever spoke about it. And I don't know. I've never heard Marilyn Monroe speak about this or mention anything about that. But it could also be part of the reason why she was taken out. That one part of that she knew too much, you know. I don't know. I have no idea. I just know that this has come forward, and this facility remained more or less unknown until the early 1990s. This was also the exact same time when the Gladio ghost, what do you call it, like the secret ghost army in all the NATO countries was disclosed in a big scandal in Italy. So I don't know if the identity of this facility was revealed at the same time. If it was part of this, I would not be surprised at all if it was connected to the Stay Behind Gladio network, and that these films were used not only for the US but for Europe and in all kinds of different propaganda, for different propaganda reasons. Latin America, you name it, wherever the CIA went in and the US military and so on, this could be very handy for them to go in and with propaganda and turn the whole thing around. Also with Cuba, all of these different stages. And so this was not just any normal little canyon. It was a very, very specific one. And exactly around this military air defense center was the place where all of these future rock stars were being pulled to. I mean, we're talking a few square miles. So it's not a big, massive area. Absolutely not. Very few houses. And right in the middle of it, this big intelligence facility. So you make up your own mind, coincidence or not. I would find it very strange if some heavy rock and roll guys smoking dope and tripping high on LSD and so on would be very welcome within that type of military facility or even anywhere nearby. But this is exactly what happened. And what is also very strange, or something that is very important to point out, is that most of these rock stars that we're talking about, we're going to mention here, had parents that were somehow involved in military intelligence or connected to especially Air Force bases and especially naval bases and so on. Coincidence or not?
Well, Jim Morrison was one of those.
One of them was Jim Morrison. And his dad, his father, was the commander of the boat that was the one that started the whole Vietnam War, saying in the Gulf of Tonkin, where they said, we're under attack, which has turned out to be an absolute false flag staged event, absolute untrue. But that was Jim Morrison's dad. And at the same time, exact same time as this was happening, this false flag, Jim Morrison came to the canyon together with these other people. Anyway, so I would say there was a specific saying in the 60s that went like, where the hell did the hippies come from? Because suddenly they were just there, you know. And this saying was, quite famous. Where did they come from? Because suddenly they just popped up, and suddenly they were visible in all different TV programs and shows and everywhere, especially a group of hippie dancers, all of this thing with painted flower power and hearts on their stomach, bellies, and so on. I'm going to come back to that. But one thing also with these future rock stars that was coming to this little canyon, most of them were at the age where they were supposed to get drafted to the Vietnam War. But as far as I know, none of them were ever drafted or charged with serious drug offense. There was never a police presence in the canyon, even though there were tons of drugs apparently floating around there. This is just a few miles from Los Angeles. So I would put a major question mark here again. What is going on?
Very interesting.
I think so too. It's like, like when you suddenly see musicians, singers, songwriters suddenly begin to gather as summoned by some unseen Pied Piper. What is going on? That is not a natural. I see life, sometimes there are weird things happening by coincidence and so on. But when you see something that is going to become so important, in the whole development of the world, the Western world, I think it's important to look into it in greater detail.
Well, what struck a chord with me is when you mentioned that they were at an age where they could be drafted. And as you said that, I'm thinking, well, who was drafted from the music scene?
None.
Yeah.
This is the thing. And if you look at the establishment that officially hated these long-haired guys,
Yeah.
they would have targeted them, get rid of these ones.
Right.
But on the contrary, they were supported by them. And the big record labels that backed them up, I mean, these were heavyweight businessmen. So what type of musicians are we talking about? We're talking about Frank Zappa is a very central figure in this whole thing. Zappa's parents were involved in the military intelligence. The Byrds, the Mamas and the Papas. Also, Frank had his own group called the Mothers of Invention.
Right.
And he was living in a very special house. It was called the Log Cabin, right in the middle of the heart of the canyon. Then you had Arthur Lee, Buffalo Springfield, the Doors. We mentioned those before. The Monkees. Can you believe it? The Eagles, Joni Mitchell, Jody Collins, Carole King, many others. Captain Beefheart, Alice Cooper, and so on. But there was also movie stars like James Dean used to hang out in the canyon before he died. You had Jack Nicholson. He was very central in the whole. Peter Fonda, Marlon Brando, all of these people were very, very close around this canyon. And this canyon later turned into the Canyon of Death. I tell you, so many people have died mysteriously in this canyon. It's uncanny. Really, really very, very strange. Anyway, so Frank Zappa was sort of the center of this whole thing. And he lived in a 5-level home that featured some 2,000 square foot living room with 3 massive chandeliers and an enormous enormous living room, where there was an open fireplace all the way from the floor all the way up to the ceiling. Very, very spooky, strange kind of house. But he was sort of the center where that was pulling all of these people in. And he also signed up quite a few of them on his own record label and so on. But when you look at this, many of these people could not play before they came to the canyon. And this is where it becomes strange again, because I thought that, Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls and so on, they were the first constructed groups where you put together a boy band or a girl band where, like, okay, we have a cute one, we have a tough one, we have a blonde one, we have a dark one, and so on. You put it together like a pie with all the ingredients needed, and you teach them to dance and move and sing, and that's it. You got a product. I thought that was quite a new thing, but when I thought of it, the more I thought about it, the Monkees were exactly made like that.
Yes.
There was no secret behind that one. And do you know who was playing as a, a pre-act to the main act? What is that called in English? Like if you have one band before the main.
It's like a warm-up band.
The warm-up band. Do you know who was the warm-up band for the Monkees in the early 60s?
I don't.
Jimi Hendrix.
Well, there you go.
What a combo. Absolutely incredible. Anyway, so people like the Doors, for instance, this group, and quite a few of the other bands as well, they came and they could hardly play. And Jim Morrison came with a whole stack of songs that it said that he wrote. He never ever wrote a song afterwards, as far as I know. He came with this stack of songs. All of the hits were there. He never ever wrote anything later than that. And in interviews and so he always said, well, I'm not really interested in music. I don't like writing. I can't play an instrument. I can't do anything. And yet he came with perfectly clear songs brought with him into the canyon. I don't know. I'm just pointing things out. And there's quite a lot of stories about how they formed bands. They couldn't play, but they were being taught how to. And there was especially one person that I forgot the name of now. He supplied the instrument to quite a few of these bands, the amplifiers, the guitars, the whole setup. He supplied them with it. And then you would think, we were talking about record labels, that of course then these tiny new bands that nobody had heard of, they would be, you know, like maybe released on small shady labels and stuff like that. No. They came from absolute nowhere, and suddenly it was like CBS and these big record labels that was just pumping it out. And at that time, there were not that many TV channels. And here, boom, right away, if they came from Laurel Canyon, prime time, in the big programs and so on, unreal. Very, very odd, I would say. Very odd. And then we have the hippie movement. Because the whole hippie movement was started from a person very close to Frank Zappa. His name was Freaky Vito or something like that. And he had like a dance group of like 8 to 10 women and so on. And they were the ones that started with this whole smoked out on my brain type of dancing, when you just stand around looking like you have either you have an epileptic seizure, or you're totally stoned, or you're you know, just totally wasted, where you just stand and dance. There's absolutely no, and with these strange clothes, very all colorful and all that was labeled the whole hippie movement, and that was being filmed and sent all over the world, was just a tiny little small group that was started by this Vito guy. Very odd character, very, very odd, and involved in some very dark and sinister satanic rituals and very strange. There's a lot of pedophile trafficking, ritualistic, satanic, very strange things going around this group, in this little area as well. It was a bit of like a center for these things. And soon we will also see that this is also the location for some of the worst mass murders committed in modern history, at least the most famous one. I'm talking about Sharon Tate and these with Charles Manson. There was 2 of these big murders in the canyon as well.
You know, Ole, you mentioned the hippie movement and the body painting and the dancing, and I don't want to digress here, but the thought that came to my mind was, then in America we had the TV show Laugh-In. That's where Goldie Hawn really got her start, and she was a dancer, body painting with flowers, flower power, and so on and so forth. Anyway.
Interesting, because there were so many big names that came out of this tiny little group. So many of them that made incredible careers afterwards and became very, very important in the whole music scene. I mean, there was a whole new style of music, the rock, heavy rock, and the whole psychedelic era came from the canyon. You know, the Grateful Dead and all of these people came from around the canyon. The whole, I would say, international music scene was so focused around this tiny little canyon here. But like I said, it was also a canyon of death. Really, it was. And this is, in some ways, I think that this is where the whole legend about being a rock star and doing an overdose, you know, dying of overdoses, a lot of it comes from people from the canyon as well. So the question is, did they die because they were pumping themselves up with drugs, or was this a way of controlling people, and if they started talking, eliminating them, and so on? I don't know. I can just if I can just name some names of the people who died in the canyon. Please keep in mind, we're only talking about a few square miles, 5, 6, 10 square miles, not a lot. The comedian Lenny Bruce died there. He was very, very a powerful comedian, very truth-seeking, dangerous individual, I would say, because he was so open in his way of criticizing and so on. He died there. The actress Sharon Tate, as you know, she was part of this awful killing with Charles Manson. Graham Parson from the International Submarine Band and the Birds. He was also there in the Flying Burrito Brothers. Mama Cash Elliot, she was very central in the canyon. She did not die there, but she actually died in the exact same room as Keith Moon from The Who. That was in Harry Nilsson, a guy from the canyon, his London home. He was one of John Lennon's drinking buddy, and John Lennon was in the canyon quite a lot as well, as were the Rolling Stones, and Jimi Hendrix was there as well. Janis Joplin, she died just outside the mouth of the canyon, just a week after Jimi Hendrix died. All of them officially of overdoses. But like we spoke about Jimmy, I think in one of your other pro shows, that was very clear that he did not die from an overdose, but that he was somebody held him down and he was drowned in red wine. They filled up his lungs, so he actually drowned. Then you have Dwayne Allman and Barry Oakley from the Allman Brothers. You have the old black and white actor Ramon Novarro. You have Sal Mineo, Diane Linkletter, Inge Stevens, Jay Sebring, Wojtek Frykowski, and Abigail Folger, Judith Lynn Sill. Many of these are not so famous names, but they're connected around as groupies or companions of rock stars and so on. Like I said, Jimi Hendrix was there, also John Lennon. Jim Morrison was also there later, and still to this very day, there's a lot of rumors about him actually going in there, doing his part, and then arranging for what look like his death, but that he's actually still alive. There's a lot of rumors saying that he's still around. Then you had roadie Bruce Barry. You had Clarence White from the Byrds. You had Graham Nash girlfriend Amy Gossage. Tim Buckley died there, singer-songwriter. Phyllis Major Brown, she was wife of Jackson Brown. You had singer Bobby Fuller and Gary Hinham, who is a chemist, and I think one of the ones that was part of supplying drugs to the canyon. He died as well. Then Gary Thane from Uriah Heep, Tommy Bolin from Deep Purple, Christine Hinton, Alan the Blind Owl Wilson. He was a singer in Canned Heath. Who else have we? Marina Elizabeth Habe, who was found carved up and tossed along the Mulholland Drive in '68, whose father was from Austria, with a background in the SS, but also who is, as far as I've been able to find, a member of the OSS, which was later turned into the CIA. So when you think of it, that is an awful lot of dead people, all of them young, in a very little area, just a canyon, and within just a few years. I mean, we're talking from late 60s to mid 70s. Yeah. I would say that is a lot of people.
Yeah, that's hard to swallow as coincidence.
Yeah. But also, it was very, very strange as well, because when they started, these big, the first rock concerts like Woodstock and the Monterey and so on, I know especially in the Monterey big open, these were the first big open rock concerts. They were handed out like between 10 and 50,000 LSD trips for free. Who was handing them out? Who would have an interest of supplying that type of heavy drugs into a massive big generation that was totally open to be seduced into some very dark areas? Because who as a private person would have any kind of benefit or interest in doing a thing like that? This is once again where I think we need to look into where did it come from? Why did they do it? And here's where we come back into COINTELPRO, the CIA, MK Ultra, how to seduce a whole generation and get them away from politics, getting them away from trying to stop them and interfere with the Vietnam War, trying to mess with the military-industrial complex, trying to get involved in politics and so on. And at the same time as these people were taken out or died, that is also where the second wave of violence hit, when they first took out Malcolm X, and then within 1 month they took out Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. And after Robert died, that was it. That was like knockout, count to 10. The whole political movement, everything just died there, and people went into despair. This is also where the Beatles breaks up, and there's this whole feeling of despair, and people gave up, and it took decades for people to get back in balance, I would say.
This was 1966, Ole?
That the Beatles broke up?
No, I mean, you're saying when this whole thing started, because RFK, he was assassinated in 1960. Oh, 68, right, that's right.
Yeah, sorry. Malcolm X, 65, and Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy, 68 in April. And so there was only about a month in between Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. And I believe that what had happened, had they not been murdered, I think that Robert Kennedy would have become the president, and he would have chosen Martin Luther King as vice president. So you can imagine what type of world we would live in now had that happened, compared to the mayhem that we are in at the moment.
Right.
So they really tried to scare Robert off by killing Martin Luther King first. But both of them were major threats.
So, Ole, let me ask you a question. Some of the folks listening, and if I'm getting too far ahead, you just stop me. Some of the folks listening might say, well, if Laurel Canyon and the artists that were there were essentially brought there, and songwriters and musicians were essentially manufactured, songs are written for them, what were they trying to do with these bands and these musicians? Because if the intent was to create a counterculture, to create chaos, some of them didn't go along with the program. I mean, as an example, I'll just pick on Zappa as an example, right? Zappa is known, especially today, to be anti-establishment, anti-war. So which way was this going? Was where Zappa went as an example, was that where he was supposed to go? That's, I guess some folks would ask that. I'm asking that question, to be honest, also.
I'm asking that question as well. I'm confused. I'm just pointing things out that is very, very odd around this whole scene. And there's an incredible investigator and researcher. His name is David McGowan. Yep. He's written a book called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And I would say that he would be more of a guy to ask about this, because it is very confusing. But it's also divide and conquer by confusion also, and many times I think that people are being manipulated. I'm not saying that all of these band members and stuff, that they knew what they were part of. This for sure was totally compartmentalized, so that people were only aware of their little, and seduced into it, pulled in because of
the appeal of being an artist, a musician, and being famous, right?
I mean, that would seduce most people, they would, look today, X Factor and all of these things. I mean, the young generation are just going absolutely berserk to become famous and be part of these programs. And it was the same, it was even more powerful back then when there were so few, and the fame was so much bigger. So, but I think that these people were handpicked because of their parents. This whole military intelligence and military industrial complex, in that network, I think that these people were, these young people that were promising musicians and songwriters and so on, were pulled out of this network, pulled into this thing, put together, and set up as bands, not understanding what was going on. I don't think they were aware of the agenda, but it was in the background that there was this big, dark force. And this is where nowadays, when you hear musicians, and they talk about that they signed over their soul, they gave up their soul to become famous, and that they signed up, they're talking about the devil and very dark forces. I don't know about that, but there's many artists that have expressed it in those exact words.
Yeah. Bob Dylan was one of those artists that actually spoke
Exactly.
about that. Yeah.
Exactly. But not only him. I mean, there's around the whole Hollywood scene, you know, in the movie business. I mean, there's a lot of these things being talked about and coming out more and more in the open. I'm not sure. I just think that this is an area which was very central in historical events and very odd, to say the least. Very odd. Like, you had this. We go back to the Lookout Mountain Laboratory, this incredible high-tech, the biggest secret operation of its time, for sure. 19,000 classified movies, and it's just down the road from where Zappa was putting in the whole elite of future musicians. I mean, we're talking like 1-2 miles.
Yeah.
A massive fenced-in area. You know, the top secret. What is going on? What are the chances for these two things to coexist next to each other? Where you had the whole hippie movement, you know, long hair, giving the finger to the whole establishment, you know, the whole music about destroying everything and revolution against everything established, right next to this other thing. And with all these strange family connections that goes into the establishments, where you have the big business, the big money supporting this whole thing. Then there's a second agenda. Then it's not just a matter of you know, talented musicians that are trying to make a career for themselves. Then we're talking about a different thing. Not saying that they for sure were aware of it. Many musicians have been tricked into doing things, not being aware of the what they're being pulled into. Very odd, to say the least.
Yeah, I think a lot of them were completely unaware. I get asked that question because, as you know, I'm a big Beatle freak, and you know, Tavistock and the creation of the Beatles, and people will say, well, then, you know, the Beatles were in on the program? And I said, no. I mean, the Beatles were selected. I mean, these guys were, when Tavistock got involved with the Beatles, the Beatles were 20, 21 years old. They were looking at fame and fortune and playing music and being on TV and the radio and making records. That was it. So the powers behind them have other plans. And in my view, what they were trying to do was they were trying to steer the band in a certain direction, get a certain message out, whatever it may be. But because the people in the band are not necessarily on board or aware of the programming, I mean, they're still free thinking for themselves, and they'll go off and do stuff or write stuff that it contradicts what the dark forces behind them would like them to do and say. So anyway, my little piece on that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please do. But you know, it's like they say, when to become successful as a book author, you know, they say that writing the book is about 5% of the work. Marketing and getting out there is 95. So doesn't matter how good a book you can write. If you don't have the muscles behind you, you won't get anywhere. So here we're talking about the Beatles being extremely talented. That is for sure. But I would say maybe that is 5%. And the whole muscle machine behind them, that's the 95. But this is the part you don't see.
Right.
You do not see how the doors are opening up for them, how the stages are opening up, I mean, there's a lot of rumors saying that all of these screaming people to start with in the audience were paid off. To start with. I'm just saying to start with. Right. And the whole screaming era then accelerated and got totally mad.
Yeah, I believe that. I don't question that. I believe a lot of that was staged and orchestrated in the beginning in order to create the hype.
Exactly. Get the hype going, and then everybody screams. And like many times when the Beatles were performing, I mean, they could have put down the guitars and left the stage because nobody could hear what they were doing anyway. That's what they said as well. And when you look at the equipment in those days, I mean, they didn't have any. The amplifiers and the loudspeakers was like a joke when you compared. And in big arenas, I mean, people have not been able to hear them at all. But the whole stadium was going wild.
They showed up with the same equipment they would play in a bar with.
I know.
And they were
I
playing in
know.
a 50,000 seat stadium. You couldn't hear them. Yeah.
So where did this screaming come from? And this is, as far as I've been informed by people in the MI6, which has come forward with different type of information about the Tavistock and how the Beatles was actually a creation. Because I grew up totally loving them. I had no idea, and it was very odd for me to hear these things. But they said that that this was actually the thing, that when the Beatles came, I mean, they were just a small time band,
Right.
Officially, who would notice them from the rest? And then somehow it was arranged and they came to the US, and it was just, there were so many people waiting for them in the USA at the airport, just totally going mad. And this guy from the MI6, he said that a major part of the people waiting didn't even know who the band was. They were just instructed, when they turn up, scream.
Well, there you go.
And who am I to say? I don't know. I wasn't there, but this is what people, or this man in the MI6 has come forward with. So, but when you look at the MI6, this is where it becomes strange as well, because when we look at the Beatles, you have this whole thing with Paul McCartney possibly dying 1966
Right.
in a car crash, and where this stand-in guy comes, an American guy, I think he was American, who was just about to win a, what do you call it, a contest for a lookalike contest. And then he disappeared, and suddenly we had this right-handed Paul McCartney that looked similar but was not the same height, and his teeth were different, and his eyes and everything different. So, and I've even been in touch with some Italian forensic experts, an Italian couple, and they swear that the guy who is today Paul McCartney is not the same guy before 1966. And there's a lot of things in the Beatles where there's all these legends about how they put messages in the music talking about the death of Paul, and also the fake, as they call him, Fall McCartney.
Right.
So when you look at it, when there's forensic experts daring to come forward, I mean, risking their professional reputation and so on, coming forward with such a wild idea, you have to start to listen, I think, at least look at it. And then when you start seeing that the eye colors are not the same, the height is not the same, the distance between the eyes and the ears and these type, because some things you can fix with surgery, and other things are more difficult, especially the ear shapes, and also you can change the position of the teeth, but you can't really, it's not easy to get it identical. So if we just for just a minute say, okay, let's say that he died 66 and he was exchanged by a new one. Who and why would somebody put such an effort into getting a double into a group like that? And here is where, when you look into it and you listen to people from the MI5, MI6 and so on, they say that they were involved in it, and that they were there was a whole series of operations done on this poor new bugger called Paul McCartney to get him as identical as possible. He had to go through a lot of different operations, and also a lot of training when it came to speaking like Paul, playing like Paul, becoming left-handed when he was actually right-handed, and all of these things. Not easy. So why? And there's some theories saying, yeah, but it was to avoid that a lot of young girls would commit suicide when they found out that Paul was dead. But, I've never heard or seen organizations like MI5 or MI6 being very emotional or caring. On the contrary, they have a totally different agenda.
Yeah.
So if they were involved, why would they put such an effort in covering it up if there was not a dark and big agenda behind the group, this Beatles group? And then also you see that it wasn't only Paul that died. John Lennon was murdered. And we last time we were talking, or one of the times we talked about how he was actually shot by Jose Perdomo, who was one of the members of this ultra secret hit team, Operation 40. But also George Harrison, he was stabbed, in his own home,
right,
with lots of security. Even though all of this security, this so-called mad guy, managed to get into him and stabbed him, I think, 3 times, so that he almost died. And this is the same George Harrison that kept calling Paul McCartney in big interviews.
right.
I mean, this was not discreet. Yeah.
No, a lot of people don't know that. George would call him Fall.
Yeah, listen, go on YouTube, listen to interviews. Paul McCartney, he said it's crystal clear,
Yep.
Paul McCartney. And also the way that Paul McCartney himself talks about him sort of trying to live up to this other person or not feeling that he's good enough. And also he got married to Linda McCartney, which was against, I mean, here's a man that could choose between all the women in the whole world. And he chooses Linda McCartney, which was a bit, I know nothing bad about Linda McCartney, but she was not drop dead gorgeous and quite a hard woman, I say, in many ways. And there's some rumors saying that she was blackmailing him. Because she knew, I think she used to work as a photographer, and she knew about this whole double thing, and that she forced Paul McCartney to marry her. Then Paul McCartney's latest, or I don't know if he's married again, but he remarried after Linda, and she has come forward with saying absolutely incredible stories about him not being what he says he is, and that there's this massive thing behind it where she fears for her life and so on.
Heather Mills.
So Heather Mills, that's her name. Yeah, she's been on many talk shows talking about these things.
Yeah, she said she was scared for her life.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just for a second here, going back, to this whole rumor thing, the thing that always perplexed me about it, even though the Beatles denied it, there were clues, and I understand that some of the clues were a stretch, but there were clues that were not a stretch, that were all over their albums, I would say, starting with Yesterday and Today. And even the title of that album, Yesterday and Today, and Paul sitting in the trunk, stuff like that, starting from there. So either somebody was having a great time fabricating this stuff, or it was one of those hidden in plain sight types of things. So I don't know, to be honest with you, but I find to this day the whole topic to be very intriguing. But
also you have like the Lennon and McCartney songs, very distinct, I mean, incredible songs, I would say. And then you have Wings, the music from the Wings, totally different style. It doesn't remind in any way or form, at least what I think, to any of the Lennon McCartney songs, which I find very odd as well.
McCartney, or whoever McCartney is today, I remember an interview where he said that for the longest time, what bothered him, and was always kind of an undercurrent in his life as a musician, was that the music that he was generating post-Beatles, especially in his Wings era, never lived up to the Beatle era material. And I always found that very interesting, because somebody would take a step back and say, well, he wrote some great songs in his post-Beatle era. But I remember reading that interview, and so even himself, he did not believe in his heart that what he was doing post-Beatles in his Wings era was as good as his Beatle days.
I totally agree. It doesn't have the same incredible variety and quality feel to it. But then that's explained by, well, it was because he wasn't working together with John Lennon.
Right.
Possible. But I still think it should have the same flavor, the same fragrance. I mean, most musicians you can hear right away, even with a guitarist. I mean, you can hear he plays a solo. I as a musician, I can often pick, two-tone, ding, ding, ding. Okay, it's him. Okay, it's him. Because you just sound just like your voice. Right. You're born with a voice. I think most people are born with, like, most musicians that write their own music, it's almost like they're writing the same song, but in variations, trying to perfect it, but it comes out in many different songs. The variation is, or you can almost always feel the coloring, the fragrance of it. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like Pink Floyd. It doesn't matter what they do, you can still hear it's Pink Floyd right away most of the time.
Right, even when they play
But
solo.
yeah, and here suddenly totally different style.
Yeah.
Totally different. And why totally different? Because the taste is different. Because when they rehearse and so on, it's like, no, don't do that on the bass, do this. Or the keyboards, don't do that, let's do this. It's because of the taste of the person writing the song. No, I prefer that. I like that better. But here we are, two very different styles. So I think let's listen to his latest wife. What's her name once again?
Oh, well,
Paul McCartney.
Well, his previous wife, you're saying?
Previous wife, yeah.
Well, he's divorced her now, Heather Mills, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it would be a very good idea to listen more to what she's saying. She ought to know what she's talking about. And if she says that she fears for her life, I would say, okay, let's look into it. Not just because of the mystery around the Beatles, but because what is the agenda behind it? What is that they're trying to cover up here? And if it's okay with you, I would like to take this even one step further.
Sure.
Because you got the rock scene, and you got there's only a very few roads going through Laurel Canyon, and one of them is called Wonderland Park Avenue. And the more you look into these strange characters surrounding this whole area and the music scene, and also people in the background with Hollywood and so on, the connections going into very, very odd, dark things when it comes to pedophile trafficking, sexual rituals, and so on. It's coming forward more and more on an international level. And one of the things, this Wonderland Avenue, there was big scandals in the whole of Europe where a very sinister pedophile network was found out, and it was called the Wonderland scandal. And there were raids done in Australia, Austria, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Norway, Portugal, and Sweden. I mean, many, many countries, including the US. So we're talking about an international network. And I think this is what we're seeing now falling apart, more and more being exposed, in the UK, with connection all the way up to the royal family and so on. But these are some of the networks where they have provided children, prostitutes, underage people to these parties, to these networks and so on, and where many, many of them have ended up dead, being disposed of. Very, very ugly, sinister scene there.
Yeah.
Anyway, if I can take it one step further, when JFK was killed in 1963, we're talking about this whole change in the world with the music scene. So many other things were happening as well. And one of the things just a few years earlier on that the CIA started was called the strategy of tension. And the whole idea was how to inflict as much fear into modern society as possible, so that the population of the Western world will totally freak out and welcome more and more so-called protection, more and more militarized police, more and more surveillance, more and more robocops, all of these things that we see today. So the whole idea for them was, how can we do that? Because without the fear, we can't move forward with our agenda. Nobody would accept it. So what they did was they used the Gladio network, this ghost army network that was built up in more or less all NATO countries. And instead of them being there to defend the population of these countries, especially in Europe and so on, what they used them for was to stage terror acts. These people were behind like the mass shootings in the supermarkets in Belgium. They blew up the train station in Bologna in Italy. There were many, many of them. And you will also see that when you look into like the 7/7 bombings, the 9/11, Oklahoma City and so on, they're very much connected, I would suggest, to the Gladio network and how it's carried out. So with that state of mind that these people have, we have to accept that they are willing to do whatever These are people that do not care what they do as long as they get to their goal. The whole idea was also to make everyone scared, that it's not just the enemy of someone that should be afraid, but anyone. So what they started was doing like random acts of violence so that everyone could be hit and everybody would fear. And this is also where we see with all of these false flag operations nowadays, they're supposedly just hit totally random so that everybody should be freaked out because I could be next online, you could be next online, and so on. So, but where did this start? In 1966, please go back. We're talking just within a very few years in between these different events. There was a soldier, a former U.S. Marine sharpshooter. His name was Charles Whitman. And he was trained at the Naval Enlisted Science Education Program in Texas. And then on August 1st in 1966, for some unknown reason, he decided to kill people. And he climbed up to the tower of the University of Texas in Austin. He climbed up there. He single-handedly carried a heavy footlocker loaded with 3 rifles, 3 handguns, I think a sawed-off shotgun, 700 rounds of ammo, 2 knives, food and water for several days, gasoline, a clock, a radio, a compass. A compass is really good when you're up in a tower. That's good. A hammer and a hatchet, and various other items. He carried it all up by himself, totally unnoticed. And then during 1.5 hours, suddenly this lone crazy guy, started shooting. And as far as I remember, I think he killed 14 people and wounded about 30 odd others. Now, witnesses saw that shots were being fired in different directions at the same time. That would, in my world, say there were more than one shooter. But here we have that this guy, that he was the one that took the fall for it. He was killed, and case closed. But this was the first time where a totally new and different type of terror was presented. A terror that could sort of threaten everyone, and that anyone could be killed at random. And this is what prompted the whole first development of the first SWAT teams. That was that thing. And these SWAT teams, if you see now, they're so central in all of these events. Everywhere we see on an international basis, if you, fart illegally, they would put a SWAT team out. I mean, my God, they're just like, you don't have to do, if you get too much vitamins in your cupboard or something like that, they hit you with a SWAT team. It's unreal. These SWAT teams, if they really should exist, they should be used in extreme situations, not just for a wrong parking or something like that, which is almost the case now.
In the United States, Ole, you're exactly right. I mean, if you sell raw milk, a SWAT team comes in. So
I know.
It's crazy.
It is totally. I mean, sometimes I feel like my head wants to explode when I think of it. It's just like, how can we accept it? But anyway, if you look at the mindset of the people behind this whole agenda, we have to accept that they're willing to do whatever. And I have a theory that they are also the power structure behind serial killers. Because one of the things that always confused me or I found very odd is that serial killers is more or less a unique American phenomenon. We don't have serial killers in other countries. You know that, okay, there's a few in Russia. I think officially there's one in Sweden, but it's like ridiculous. And then in the States, you got like bomb, 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 bomb. So many. And when you look at these serial killers, they have quite a lot of things in common. And one of them is that they have somewhere down the line been close to naval and military bases, or they've been taken into psychiatric institutions connected to military intelligence and so on. So there's also strong claims that the Office of Naval Intelligence, the ONI, has taken convicted murderers from military prison and used behavior modification techniques on them and then relocated them in US embassies around the world as mind control assassins. And I know I mentioned the whistleblower Chip Tatum before.
Yes.
And one of the times I spoke to him, he said he confirmed this thing because he had flown some of these people from prisons to, I think it was in some military institution in, was it Missouri? St. Louis, I think it was, and also in New Mexico, out in the desert, in some of the, near the Area 51 and so on, that he transported these people in helicopter, these prisoners and so on, to from there and back, where he said the famous doctors did different, he said, I don't know what they did with them, but he referred to them as the famous doctors. So I'm going to find out who he's talking about. But he answered that when I was talking about mind control and serial killers. So anyway, when you look at the CIA handbook about how to carry out assassinations and so on, they are very specific in the way that they recommend their agents to do it. One of the favorite ways to kill somebody is with a .22, a very fine caliber weapon, because the sound is very soft compared to a heavy caliber gun. And also, what happens if you have a more, what do you call it, a more heavy caliber, like a 45 or 38 or something like that, the chances, if you do a headshot, the chances of a bullet passing right through the skull of someone without killing them is quite big, according to some experts, that you just get a hole straight through the brain. But since we use only a fraction of the brain, sometimes the chances of you surviving is quite big. So, but on the contrary, if you use a .22, a caliber .22, what happens is that the bullet penetrates the skull, and then it doesn't have the power to get out, but it starts ricocheting inside the skull, causing maximum damage and more or less always instant death. So it's a very efficient weapon to do executions with, silent, easy to conceal, and very deadly. The second option, they say, is that the best thing is to when you approach a crime scene or a victim that you're going to take care of, do not do it with a weapon on you. Once you're there, use any type of blunt object or whatever you can find on site, kill the victim, and leave without it, so that you will come and leave the crime scene without the weapon that can be traced to you. So when you look at these serial killers that have been very famous and widespread in the US, there's this, I think, this common idea that has been presented through Hollywood movies and so on, that serial killers, they act alone, they're odd, they're driven by demons, they have very special patterns, the particular type of victim, age, gender, race, hairstyle, these type of things that, oh, he was only going for red hair women around 25, and the scene often like a ritualistic type of knot or something, almost like a business card that they left at the scene, and so on. And the FBI has even come up with a technique which is called profiling, where they, from a crime scene, say that they can decide, okay, this is a white male, he will be in his mid-30s, he will live alone, he will be doing all of these things. And that when you come to a crime scene, that by the way the murder has been carried out, it will point you towards, or it will possibly point you towards the person who have done it, and that you can track him down through this very similar pattern of killing. But then when you look in real life, and these very famous serial killers like Ted Bundy or Henry Lee Lucas or Otis Toole and these type of people. It doesn't make sense at all. There's no clear pattern when it comes to victims. It's everything from children to people in their 80s. And there's absolutely no clear pattern of how they do it. But very often, I would say the pattern I see is like you have a lot of them killing with a caliber 22 headshots, or it's an incredibly brutal slaughter. Absolutely horrendous scene, and sometimes cleaned up totally. I mean, there's not a trace, there's not a hair, there's nothing left on the crime scene, but absolute slaughter. And it said, yeah, but of course it's the same killer. Okay, so it's the same killer that comes in at night and kills 3 people with a headshot while they're asleep, that will just chop someone up in pieces with a butcher knife and so on. Does that sound as the same person to you? Then you look at the witnesses, very often describe that the person leaving the crime scene, they describe these people as like totally different, not even closely resemble each other. I mean, heavy set with bald, and then the other one said Mexican with black hair, and the third one says a black male, and so nowhere near. So once again, what is going on here? I would suggest that there is a good possibility that these serial killers have been created to a major extent by the same forces in these military bases, whereby with MK Ultra and mind control things have managed to get in control of these individuals. I mean, they do it. One of the ways they do it is put them through absolute awful things where torture and incredible painful things that will make the personality split into more than one, so that they can compartmentalize the personality, meaning that they can activate and deactivate one part of the personality, and that personality, that part, will have no idea what the other one is doing.
So multiple personality?
Exactly, that's what we're talking about. So that they can use somebody to commit awful atrocities, turn that personality off, and the other one will just keep on living a totally normal life, being a totally ordinary person, having absolutely no idea that he's actually the one who has committed these things. And this is not just theories. This has been proven again and again when you look into these things. But many of the serial killers, I would suggest that I think we're looking at a cleanup of, like often it's some of these people that have been killed by headshots and so on have been people that have been into these ritualistic things, or pedophile gangs, or drug trafficking and so on. And I think many of these murders are like getting rid of the competition and then covering it up with some of these awful random acts of absolute atrocities, and then blaming it all on a boogeyman, giving it this a monster, the Boston Strangler or the whatever they're called, to just freak people out and live in total fear, not putting any attention to what is going on at the same time. Because this is often how they do it. They distract the population. They say, look over here, just like if you make an explosion or something like that, everybody would look in that direction and nobody will notice what's going on the other side or behind them and so on. And, quite a few of these serial killers, some of the people who are fighting for their rights to get off death row and so on are mothers of their victims. And can you imagine a mother trying to get somebody who has murdered her child off the hook? No, these are mothers that have seen, oh my God, this guy is totally innocent. He has nothing to do with it. But do you remember I told you about in Operation 40 that where this ultra secret hit team, where George Bush Senior was the paymaster, and where this team of assassins had followed him through his career, the core members have followed him all the way through his career, and that when some of them were jailed, he got them out and he got them pardoned.
Right.
And George Bush Senior was the one that pardoned these mass murderers and terrorists. What does that tell you? Okay, so let's look at some of these serial killers here. If you take Henry Lee Lucas, I think most American people are aware of this man. He has an account of some, I don't know, between 300 and 600 victims, according to different sources. I mean, we're talking the real deal when it comes to serial killers. When finally he was caught, and he was scheduled for execution on June 30, 1998. So at that time, no governor of any state at any time in history had carried out more execution than George Walker Bush. That's George Bush Jr. I mean, he was like a killing machine when he was a governor in the state in Texas. So here we have Henry Lee Lucas being scheduled for execution, and just a few days before it happens, 12 days before the execution, Governor Bush made a special request to the State Board of Pardons and Paroles, where all the members were Bush appointees, to get him off the hook. And as far as I know, Henry Lee Lucas then became the first and ultimately the only recipient of mercy while Bush was a governor. I mean, how odd is that? Please be aware that this is the same Bush that signed a death sentence for a great-grandmother in her 60s that was convicted of killing her chronically abusive husband. I mean, this guy has no empathy. There's no heart anywhere nearby, wherever he's been. And then he pardons Henry Lee Lucas. Unreal. Absolutely unreal. And then you have Otis Toole, who was Henry Lee Lucas' partner in crime, who was a self-convicted, well, he openly talked about him being a cannibal and that he had slaughtered multiple people, you know. What we're talking like as close to monsters as you can get, you know, in the shape of a human being. And what happened with him? He was sentenced to death in Florida, which is Jeb Bush country at that time, or county, and pardoned just as Henry Lee Lucas. This is quite heavy stuff, I think.
It is. And the reason why, you know, I'm trying to remember some of these things. I remember the names, and like with Otis Toole, right? That was in the 1990s. He died in the 1990s, I believe. Yeah.
But the thing is, you know, like people who have been faithfully in duty, they give them a gold watch or something like that. And if you're like a railroad employee or something like that, here it's a different. You take care of your own. And also these people, I think the reason they pardon them is because they can use them again.
Yeah.
But do you know also that Henry Lee Lucas, he claimed that he was a close friend of Jim Jones. Do you remember Jim Jones of the People's Temple?
Yeah.
And this is, they say there's quite a lot of evidence showing that the whole People's Temple in Guyana was a CIA experiment. Maybe you remember this mass suicide in Guyana, that was very, very odd and very strange thing that happened, where I can't remember how many, but I think it was in the hundreds where people committed suicide or said to have committed suicide in this People's Temple community down there. But when you look at the evidence, you will see that many of the victims were found piled on top of each other, and many of them were killed with headshots and cyanide. And it does not make sense at all, this thing that they committed suicide. And there's a lot of evidence also pointing to this community being like a CIA experiment for many, many odd things. But anyway, Henry Lee Lucas said that he was the one who was taken on a chartered plane to Guyana to personally deliver the cyanide that were used in the infamous massacre. I mean, what do you say about that?
Yeah.
Like, here we have an absolute monster, a lowlife, officially, that if what he says is true, was taken on a chartered plane to Guyana to deliver the poison to this massacre. And I think that him being pardoned by George Bush Jr. gives credit to his words, that this might be the real thing.
Yeah.
That he's not just bragging or whatever.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I don't know this clearly as well as you do, but what was the reason given for the pardon? Was there a reason ever given, or was it basically done and then nothing to see here, everybody move on?
I can't remember right now, but okay. I know that it was Bush Jr. personally who made a special request to the State Board of Pardons and Paroles. He was the one doing it in person. Why on earth would he do that?
Right.
And exactly like, why on earth would his father pardon the so-called terrorist part of this extreme team of assassins in Operation 40? And one of them that George Bush Sr. pardoned was a man by the name of Orlando Bosch. He was also called Dr. Death. And he delivered explosives to hundreds of these terror events. One of the things was that they blew up an airliner, killing, I think it was like 73 people and so on. And he had, I think to this very day, they have like a holiday in Florida called, named after him, the Orlando Bosch Day. I don't know now, as far as I know, he died. So I don't know if they still have this holiday, but just like another guy in Operation 40, Nestor Izquierdo, who was a spotter in the Daltex building when they killed Kennedy, there's a sculpture, there's a statue of him in Florida as well, in Miami. So we're into some very strange areas. And in my book, Coup d'etat in Slow Motion, just to show what type of people we're dealing with here, I've listed just the crimes that Orlando Bosch was sentenced for. And I mean, it's page up, page down, page up, page down, page up, page down, filled with assassinations and blowing people up. Orlando Lettier in Washington, D.C. being one of them, and so on. I mean, absolutely incredible. Then you have another one, Rafael Reséndez Ramirez, if you remember him. He was called, I think they call him the Night Stalker. Anyway, he had been taken into custody several weeks prior to when to what I'm going to talk about. He was taken in by the U.S. Border Patrol, only to be promptly released, despite that he was on the FBI's most wanted list at the time. How can the U.S. Border Patrol take someone and then let them go if they're on the FBI's most wanted list? Big question mark. Okay, then just a few weeks later or something like that, this man, everybody was looking for him. He walked across the bridge in Juarez in Mexico into El Paso and turned himself in. He was wanted for at least nine murders. And he insisted on being surrendering to a Texas Ranger. And at this time, the Texas Rangers was controlled by George Bush Jr. Here he is, a mass murderer that left the country with no death penalty, Mexico, and entered the execution capital of the Western world to surrender. I mean, does this make sense? It makes sense if you're looking for protection by your employee.
Right.
It does not make sense if you really are a serial killer, And this is where I think we need to change our way of looking upon this to make it logical, because things are logical. The truth is often very simple, but hidden in fog and smoke and covers and all that. But the truth is very simple most of the time. And I would suggest that these serial killers are very often are not the ones who have carried out many of these assassinations. Many of these, like with the ones with the headshot and so, I think have been carried out by teams of professional assassins that have just eliminated enemies or competitors in the drug trade or wherever, anyone they had problems with. And then to cover the whole thing up, they have done some awful atrocity, chopping people up in pieces to freak the population out, and at the same time cover up distract the eye from who the real victims are. Just like if you want to get rid of a couple of people, blow them up when they're on an airplane, so that when you look at the crime scene, you have no idea who was the target. There was 200 people on the plane. One of them was the target. Who? But if you hit them right, if you kill them with a headshot, it's very clear that they are the victims. So they often try to distract the eye, to get the attention away from what is actually going on.
These people put no value on life, and I think this is very important for the audience to understand, because there's many people who believe that that level of evil can't possibly exist, that nobody is that dark. But the truth of the matter is, as you're explaining all this, there are very, very dark people who perform very, very dark acts, and they don't care about life. As long as it meets, they're able to meet their objectives, or whatever those objectives are, it's fair game.
I've always been in absolute confusion when it comes to these forces, people. I even met some of them, and I don't get it. I really don't understand how they function, how they work, because it is just like you say, there's no empathy, taking care of business, nothing personal often, there's absolutely no emotion. And Chip Tatum, the CIA whistleblower I told you about, he used to work directly under George Bush Sr. He was the commander of the ultra-secret hit team Pegasus, where they carried out at least 17 assassinations globally, and a lot more than he doesn't talk about. But and he says that George Bush Sr. is extremely intelligent, but he's also the most evil person he has ever met in his life. And this is a man who spent his whole adult life surrounded by assassins, mercenaries, military soldiers, snipers, all of this. And this is what he says about George Bush Sr. I think that says a lot.
Yeah.
And when you look at the Bush family, oh my God, what they have been involved in, it's just unreal. And I think, just the thought of Jeb Bush, for instance, now coming up as a new president together with Hillary Clinton. Oh God, back to this brain wanting to explode type of feeling, because we're looking at extreme criminals. There's
still large portions of the public that embrace these types of people, and they embrace Jeb Bush. They embrace Hillary Clinton. It is very disheartening, I have to say, Ole. I know, we try to keep it very positive. I know you try to keep it very, very optimistic, but man, it's amazing to me that all of this information could be out there today, and people pay no attention to it. They're unaware of it. They don't understand the Bush history. They don't understand the Clinton history. And these people are going to run for president of the United States, and there are many, many folks in this country that would not blink to push the lever to put them in the White House. It's very, very disturbing.
I shake my head and wonder.
Yeah.
But also, it's important to understand that they would put themselves in the White House without people pushing the button as well. So
there you go.
Just like George Bush Jr. did in Florida, where his dear Jeb Bush was helping to cover the whole thing up.
Yeah.
And then you have Marvin Bush, who was part of the security of the Twin Towers.
Right.
This family, oh my God, everything from the Vietnam War to all of the wars that have followed, more or less, to so many assassinations and the whole drug epidemic and the Iran-Contra scandal. The
Prescott Bush.
It just goes, oh my God, yeah. That Prescott Bush goes back to, that's Granddad Bush for George Bush Jr. He was involved in the so-called Zimmerman telegram. That was a fake telegram that tricked the U.S. to join the First World War. And then Prescott Bush was part of funding the Hitler war machine in the Second World War, together with people like Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles, the two Dulles brothers, that was then very involved in creating the CIA, involved in Operation Paperclip, and involved in the JFK assassination, and afterwards the cover-up of the whole thing. They've just and George Bush being senior, being part of the JFK assassination as the paymaster for Operation 40 on site in the Daltex building when the shooting took place, being part of the whole cover-up where you had the future the future presidents as Gerald Ford, Richard Nixon, who was the one that was given the task to create Operation 40. And then Gerald Ford being, as they say, not very intelligent. They said he had problems walking and chewing gum at the same time, which is not a compliment if you're a president. But these people have just been part of covering it up. And then they've used actors like Ronald Reagan that was just there to, well, great to be on stage and say the things that people want to hear. But in the background, you had George Bush very much working to take over. And he's just muscled his way from the inside. And I would very much suggest that George Bush Sr. was the brain behind the Watergate burglary, to take down Richard Nixon from the inside in this big scandal. And then also the one behind the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. So this Bush family, oi, 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 oi.
Yeah, wasn't there a relationship between the Bushes and the Hinckleys?
Hinckley was invited for dinner by George Bush's son the night before. Josh right. Bush, I think his name was. But what are the chances? It's just like George Bush sitting and having a meeting with bin Laden's family when the Twin Towers. I mean, what are the chances? I mean, really, what are the chances? And then the only plane that is allowed to leave the US is the plane with bin Laden's relatives. Right. I mean, what are the chances? I mean, we're seeing this exact same key people in so many of these incredibly historical events that have changed the whole face of the world. I mean, the situation we are in now, without this handful of people, we wouldn't be there. There's so few, and when you look at it, I mean, the so-called elite, they prefer to call them the elite. I call them the lightless or the minority. They're only like a few thousand. They're not that many. And we are billions. Compare the two, it's like a grain of sand on a beach. It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous that we are in this situation. And the only reason that they are in these, or that they are so-called powerful, is just because we play along and that we do it for them. Because when you look at it, many of these people, like they say, yeah, but they have the world's most advanced military systems and so on. I mean, they wouldn't be able to push the button, many of them. You know, they wouldn't be able to install a program on a laptop. They're good at sitting in the background, drinking martinis, smoking cigars, and acting as they were doing it for the good of people. But when it comes to it, many of them are not very intelligent. They're very corrupt people, not honorable people at all, many of the people in the so-called elite, I would say, but very thirsty for power and desire, very filled with dark desires and so on. But the thing is that without us, without the people being the skilled people that can fly drones and take care of all these extremely advanced technical things and surveillance systems, and without us or them, they would have no chance whatsoever. So the thing is for us, the rest of us, to wake up to what's going on and see, oh my God, I can't believe that I've been so duped, that I've been so asleep and so brain dead for such a long time that they have been able to get away with this. It really is high time for us to wake up, because if we don't wake up now, the future is not worth living, I tell you. If this group gets away with their agenda, oh my God, it's an awful, very, very dark agenda. And they want to control all areas of life.
When I talk to folks, and I'm talking about family and friends, and they think that everything that I talk about or express is, conspiracy stuff, tinfoil hat wear, and all that stuff. I just remind them that if you have kids or you have grandkids, your denial and your apathy or your unwillingness to engage in trying to become more aware of what's really going on, how the world really works, you're just leaving a very abysmal world and picture for your kids and your grandkids. And, and sometimes when I mention it and I bring it up that way, it makes them stop and think, because many times, too many times, I should say, many folks think in terms of them. I have mine. I'm okay. All is good. They don't think past themselves. They don't think to their kids. They don't think towards their grandkids. So I don't know. I throw that in there. I don't know why, just to, I guess, as commentary.
It's also important to find out that nobody is secure. Nobody is safe.
Right.
If they get what they want, there's only a handful that would be so-called safe, and the rest of us will be dealt with in not a very nice way. So it doesn't matter if you're a general or sometimes a millionaire or a boss for a big company or something like that. The more powerful you are, the more of a threat you are to them, they will just eliminate you.
That's right.
So I would suggest, let's wake up now while we still can it, and while we're still in a possibility to do something good and do something active. And I don't know if I wrote a song in the 90s. I would like to read the lyrics for you if that would be okay.
Absolutely, Ole.
It's a song called From Prison to Paradise. It was inspired after I met David Icke in the early 90s. And I think still to this day that it's very spot on. Like I said, I wrote this in the 90s, but it's at a special point in the lyrics. I come to a place where I think that is where we are now, where I really think that 2015 is an incredibly powerful year, and this is the year it will all change for the better. There's a major obstacle to transcend and go through. But I strongly feel in my heart that we're going to come out of this beautifully if we can just keep the focus. And the focus is to stay out of hate, stay out of revenge, stay focused with a heart full of compassion and love, but totally fearless, exposing these powers. This is not a time to pick your nose and change channels. This is a time to do something. You were born for a reason. And a major reason for that is for what is to come here. So the song goes like this. Once upon a time, in a place not far from here, there was so much loneliness, despair, and oh so much fear. Darkness ruled all over the land. There were lightning in the sky, causing wars and separation, with no one knowing why. These evil times raised leaders, disguised as kind and true, hiding the truth in misty fog so only very few people knew. Controlled by an elite few, manipulating you and me, closing out the line of power that can make us all be free. Wake up, we gotta wake up. Wake up, we gotta wake up now. Forced by invisible powers, demanded to conform into shapes unknown to mankind, making him totally abnormal. Drowned in debts and sorrows, blaming others for their lot, made man believe to be inferior, feeling tiny like a dot. But then came times of change, covering countries and their towns. Few became many, and soon the prison walls came down. Starting with the men in the mirror staring right back into their eyes, understanding that this was a chance to stop those hideous lies. Unhappiness is merely an illusion of misery, based on brainwash and a misconception of true reality. From now on, let's build bridges between our souls and hearts, so we together can rejoice when the final change comes to its start. Wake up, we gotta wake up. Wake up, we gotta wake up now. Turning prison into paradise may seem too much to achieve, but believe me, it only takes one strong spirit to be free. The true power of a pyramid is never ever at the top. Instead, it's with the people that can make this global game stop. Did you get it? Wake up, we gotta wake up now.
That's a great song, Ole. What a lot of folks don't know is you're also a musician, and you are a great musician. Because I listen, I listen to your songs, and you don't talk about it, but I'm going to include the link to your music also, because I listened to all your songs, and I thought to myself, this man knows how to write music. So,
well, thank you so much.
I want to thank you for all the work that you've done, and I also want to say to the audience that Ole's work is all self-funded, so if you could sponsor him and go to his website and help out with some of the funding, I know Ole would greatly appreciate that.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
I'm very happy that you mentioned it, because it's not easy being on your own and do this type of things. Also, I've been attacked many times because I'm not the most popular person in some areas.
I can imagine.
But at least we could make this whole interview, because normally Skype gets shut down as soon as I start mentioning names and so on. But also, Mike, if I can return the compliment, because I feel very honored to be on your show. I feel that you are an incredible radio host and an incredible human being that are open to this kind and are willing to spread it out to your fellow human beings. And I say, do not despair, even though people might see you as a tinfoil hat sometimes. That's join the club. That's the tinfoil hat club. And the guy that talked about the whole Tavistock thing behind the Beatles thing, he also in one of his speeches explained the real meaning of the word paranoid. He said that we have totally misunderstood that word and it's been misused, because he said the real meaning of the word paranoid is the ability to connect events that no other people can see. So in that case, that they're connected, but no one else can see it. So in that case, I'm going to be a happy and proud paranoid person that would be very happy to share with my paranoia.
I feel good to be paranoid now, Ole.
No, but it is a scary, scary time at times. And I think all of us have ups and downs. I focus on the ups and this is the thing. When people start criticizing and say, well, now I'm going to play the devil's advocate, ask yourself, does this guy need your help? Does he need an advocate, the devil? I think not. So why not focus, instead of being critical, do your own research and see what you can come up with and do something useful instead of trying to stop people like Mike and myself. I'm talking now also to people wherever they are who interferes and disconnects Skype and attacks computers. I mean, I've just had 3 hard drives destroyed. And so I'm like, I tell you, I talk directly to who you are, whoever is doing it. Please understand that you're shooting yourself in the foot. The people that you are serving, they do not give a shit about you as an individual. You might be paid well at this point in time. As soon as they don't need you, they will dispose of you. And they might dispose of you earlier or faster than the rest of us because you know too much by then. You know. So I would say, instead of sitting doing what you do and sitting and watching and looking in all these surveillance cameras, controlling the rest of us, wake up. It really is time for you to wake up, because you and people in uniform are the ones controlling the rest of us, making their agenda possible. I say, go home, hug your wife, hug your kids, start appreciating what's going on in your life and see that you're being such a major part of their agenda, their greed. It's not for you at all. So why don't use your skills, technical skills and something like that, whatever it is you're good at, and turn it into something good instead of being here pestering us, your friends and family, you know? Wake up. It's not even fun anymore. You're really making my life difficult, and I don't appreciate that. I'm here to help you as well, you know? So I really appreciate you backing off, take a step back, get the finger off the button that starts interfering with, and look around, see maybe the people in the office, wherever you're hiding, because you're always hiding. We never see you. I mean, you're very courageous, not. And look around you, see if there's other people that might be similar in a state of the similar awakening, and see if you can join up with them. Because I know for you to take a step out is scary. It's scary for all of us, and for whistleblowers especially. But it's through whistleblowers that we will help to destruct this whole thing. So we welcome you. Be brave, get some balls, take a step forward, and we will welcome you. The thing is, the ship is going down anyway, in my opinion. So the sooner you take a step out, the more of a hero you will become. The later you do it, you will be seen as a rat. You know, when the ship goes down, okay, the rats leave, but they won't be welcomed. So now is the time.
Excellent points, Ole. You know, and the thing is, you know, I do this not because let's just put it this way, and I'm talking to the audience now. I would prefer not to do this.
So do I.
I would prefer not to be doing all this research. I would prefer not to be doing, you know, radio shows, and because I would prefer to live a nice, quiet, peaceful life, self-governing, full of love, family, and friends. That is what I would prefer to be doing. But I find myself compelled to do this. We have to do this, because if we don't do this, like you said, there's one ship, and if we keep doing what we're doing, it's going into the tank.
Yeah. I spent 30 years of my life. You know, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I want a cold beer. I want to sit and play with you in your studio. I'm going to, you know, let me bring my guitar. I'll come to your studio, but I'm not in a position where I can even come to the States without being at risk, you know? Yeah. People have warned me, if I come there, they might take me out. I mean, what kind of world is that?
I know.
I want to come and join my friend Mike and sit and jam in his studio, and they might kill me. I mean, come on, that is not on.
Right. And the
That's
thing
not
is,
the world we should live in. That is not the way our children should grow up.
Right. And for the comments with regard to there's some kind of an agenda to do this work, I'm going to tell you right now, I make zero money at this. I do not get
Join
paid.
the club.
Zero. So I do this because I feel it has to get done, not because somebody's, you know, writing a check. There are no checks. There's no money. There's no compensation. There's nothing. So, and that goes for many, many of us that are doing this work, Ole. And I know you know that, but I just want to make sure the audience understands that.
This is just like you say. It's hard for me to even justify it in front of my family, because they say, why are you spending all this time? I mean, come on, you need to feed your children and take care of this. I'm trying to do that as well. But it's just like you say, it's 30 years of my life. Right. That is 30 years. It is a lot, you know. And but I'm happy to do it. But I really appreciate people waking up as well, you know. Yep. I hope that this is going out there and helping to spread what I see as truth, but in a loving way. It's very important that what we spread out there is not fear. It is very dark information, yes, but that we don't spread fear or hate or anger or some frustration, yes, and despair sometimes, but that it comes out there in a way that can empower people, and so that we can start seeing beyond all they try to divide and conquer. They try to point out boogeymen. They try to point at us as enemies between races, religions. You know, in my world, I don't care if you're blue or red or green or Russian or Jew or Christian, whatever. If you got a good heart and you do well and you take care of people and you're good to your friends and neighbors and fellow human being, my God, you're anytime. My guest room is here. You know, you're so welcome. But if you start messing up and killing and torturing innocent people, and so I just can't sit still and say nothing. And if you really mess the whole place up, then there's no option anymore. That is why Mike, beautiful Mike, and I are here. And just like you say, I would so prefer not to be here. Right. One of the things I really enjoy with this, or one of the things I enjoy, is meeting people like you, because I would not have met you had it not been for these difficult times. But I find that people like yourself, there's quite a few other radio hosts and so on, are putting themselves on the line. We're all doing the same, and this takes a certain kind of person to do that. And so when I do that, and when I see you, I see in your eyes, and so I see this determination and this grounding, but a grounding in love and compassion and that is the reason you do it. And then it's like, I want to embrace you as a brother, and I feel honored to have met you like this. So if nothing else good comes out of this, I have met you, and I feel very proud and good about that. But my intention is to turn this whole world into this beautiful place it's supposed to be. And I just feel I am not going to give up until there's total ceasefire globally. How it's going to happen, I have absolutely no idea. If it's going to happen, I have absolutely no idea. But that's the intention. Equal rights for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're man, white, red, blue, green. Doesn't matter. We're here. We've been put in this beautiful, beautiful world to live a beautiful life together. And then we have like a cancer growth that is just trying to kill the whole thing. So we have to expose it. Even though it's painful and smelly, if not, it will kill the body. It will kill it all.
That's right. Well, Ole, again, thank you so much. As you know, you have an open invitation to talk about whatever it is you'd like to talk about, so we can get the awakening, make it bigger and larger.
Get your calendar. Let's book a date anytime you want.
Well, what I'll do is after this, I'll send you an email, and we'll get another date up on the calendar.
Sounds great. My website is Light on Conspiracies. This is a very handpicked name, Light on Conspiracies, because the light is the thing that will win. The darkness is the only lack of light. It has no power in itself. It's just emptiness. So the only thing we need to do is fill it with light, and we will be fine.
And that concludes our interview with Ole Dammegard, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Ole's work is completely self-funded, so if you could take a moment and visit his website, lightonconspiracies.com, and consider donating or sponsoring his work, it would be greatly appreciated. You can also purchase Ole's books at his website, including the highly acclaimed Coup d'etat in Slow Motion. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com, or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. And to sign off, here's Ole's song, From Prison to Paradise. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
It's our future.
Once upon a time, in a place not far from here, there was so much loneliness, despair, and oh so much fear. Darkness ruled all over the land, there was lightning in the sky, causing wars and separation, with no one knowing why. These evil times raised leaders, disguised as kinda true, hiding the true and misty fogs only very few people knew. Controlled by an elite few, manipulating you and me, closing out the light of power that will make us all be free. Wake up. 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 perception and misconception of true reality. From now on, let's build bridges between our souls and hearts, so we together can rejoice when the final change comes to its start. Wake up, wake up, wake up, we gotta wake up, somewhere. Wake up, wake up, wake up, we gotta wake up. Turning prison into paradise may seem too much to